Hi everyone. This week I read Article 38. It is titled The Ethics of Using Advanced Technologies in a CCSSM Environment, which is your Common Core Standards for Mathematics. The introduction just started talking about advanced technologies. This actually focuses on CAS, or the Computer Algebra Systems. It's a software that performs symbolic mathematics, and it just talks about how during this time, calculators really weren't mentioned in K through 8 standards. The first part talks about what do we mean by ethics. Just pretty much rules and behavior based on beliefs as it relates to math and technology. Um, and then what has been taught in the mathematics classroom. It also discusses like 8 codes of ethics that it's going to discuss throughout the chapter. The first one was personal choice and individual liberty. So pretty much when students should have kind of the choice, when students are able to make their own choices when to use technology that pose difficulties because teachers don't want to give up control in the classroom. And then it also poses difficulties just because just is it helping them like understand and do the mathematics. The second one was openness. So without exposure to technology, they cannot make the choice to use it or not. So they need to be teachers, districts needs to be open, allowing them to use the technology, keeping it away from them because they won't use it properly. So other side is just making sure they're doing the right thing with it. Third one is the accurate representation of knowledge. Technology does not always show your true knowledge. Like I know for me, and maybe this sounds terrible, but my second period is my low class. That's my co-taught. That's my struggling learners. So in there, we use the calculators heavily because I know that they're not going to be the mathematician. So I don't want them to be. I don't want them to be stressed out because they don't know or understand the math when you can use the calculator to do the math. Especially if that's not something they're going to see in their everyday lives or they're not going to go in more advanced math classes. Teaching without technology, pretty much you're asking, is that an accurate representation? Which I think it is, with or without it, depending on your students and what you're doing. And then it just says, should math use paper or pencil? Why not use technology, even though we view it as paper and pencil because that is part of the material? It does not show or always use the same algorithm, so it's saying that technology may solve it in different ways than what we are accustomed to. And then the test doesn't always allow it, so should we is one of the questions. But I mean, I know at least for us, you can use the calculator on every section of the standardized test now, so I would assume that's the same way for everybody. The fourth one, promotion of health and safety. Technology harms the brain is what they're trying to say here. The fifth one is teacher behavior. So just how we treat the students. Are we motivating them? Is it negative motivation? They talked about how their high failure rate from the first year. So that kind of dissuades, I guess, the teachers. And just getting them to see technology to help and not hurt. Six is fairness. So you may have two different learning environments. So is it fair the way that one can use it and one cannot? We're required to take the same math, but some do not have the necessary support. So is that fair? So is this following the code of ethics? And then for the most part, must be provided to all students. So the biggest thing there is with fairness, just like whatever you're doing, does every child have that opportunity? And then it talks about recognize students' differences and being unbiased with that one. And then the second part gets into the CAS and the curriculum. It uses standards for mathematical practice 8, so use appropriate tools strategically. So how this computer algebra system goes with this one, and then they talked about how paper and pencil is a good tool and technology is a bad tool. Um, so here it also talks about that how it's not used to do mathematics, or how it doesn't need to like it should not be used to do mathematics. It should be used to just like be an aid, a helper. You still should be doing it. The calculator shouldn't be doing everything for you. But again, like if you have students like in my second period, why not? But I don't know. So it says there's controversy and disagreements in there, and I'm sure a lot of people will still disagree with me. I know a lot of people, even in my county, when they go to, I teach eighth, so when the students go to ninth, I still teach them how to do it without the calculator because some teachers are against the calculators, which I don't understand why. They're just afraid that it won't promote understanding because you're just putting everything in the calculator. And then pretty much it should be used for more complicated examples. But what makes, they kind of talk about what makes an example more complicated. So just getting into like different ways things can be looked at. Um, if you have a calculator, then they talk about is paper and pencil needed when you have a calculator. And honestly, depending on what you're doing and who your students are, I know for me, no, it's not necessary. This is probably the first year some of my teachers have seen students work without showing their work because the calculator can pretty much do everything for you, unless they're kids that are capable of showing their work. It talks about how everybody shouldn't have to learn everything. So dividing polynomials is not necessary for everyone. So they should be able to use the technology, which I agree. We were learning scientific notation last week, and one of my students was like, "Why are we learning this?" So I gave them a project on how to figure out why we're learning this. And even though they may not use that as time goes on, it just gives them an idea. But it's also one of those things where like maybe I should just be able to use a calculator to do this assignment. Um, Next one talks about is it in the standards, which it is in the standards, but there's a lot of disagreement with how it is being used in the standards. So, and then the implementation of it in the Common Core standards using it. So the biggest thing it says, sorry. So just making sure how it's being said and used in the standards, which gets back into like your third part in this chapter, applying ethics to answer some common questions about CAS. Um, so it goes back into fairness, which is the school's perspective. Students need to know the difference in the courses. So if you have in different courses, they view it sometimes as not being ethical because not all students have access to the material, which now I know we're one to one. So my students have access to the material because it's on their Chromebook. The only way they don't is if they are not using their resources the right way. Um, Sometimes it can violate personal choice. So the question here is it ethical to allow those students who have access to advanced technology to use it, knowing that other students do not? It's not fair. It violates personal choice. But again, nowadays most schools are one to one. Education shouldn't be about competition, but competition with yourself. And then the U.S. is behind, even though there has been improvement, which still seems true today. We need to find ways so everyone can use it because it's not fair to get rid of it, which I agree. And then just talks about honesty with students. So sometimes students are using things without the teacher knowledge. Um, then it says becomes with a price that they have total dependence on technology, which is probably my second, but it's also like, is it a bad thing? Because these kids probably going to be doing certain things in life that doesn't require them to do slope intercept form. Don't accept bad habits. Other places may not allow technology, takes away personal choice. I try to teach both students and allow them their own choice. So I have some students that will use it and I have some students that won't use it. It's personal choice because I know it's going to be provided on milestones. Sorry this was so long, but this was a very long chapter. Thank you guys for watching.